Welcome back to Your Voice America's Campaign Corner. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and today I have the pleasure of seeing yet again Courtland Sykes, candidate for the United States Senate from the great state of Missouri. Courtland, how are you?
Ann, thank you for having us. We're doing well. We're in the final stretch of this primary victory lap before the election on August 7th.
Wow, so it's been an amazing journey for your team. I met you at the Roy Moore Watch Party. That was an unusual evening, but I'm glad to have met some great MAGA candidates as yourself. You've got an incredible support team behind you. Your fiancée, Chanel, rallies the troops regularly. I'd like to talk a little bit about your history and what it is you're looking to accomplish, because you are a former U.S. Navy veteran. You joined the force after the service, I should say, after September 11th in 2001. And you had quite an illustrious career there. Went on to Harvard, where you met Chanel, and have become engaged. And you're currently also a managing partner in a business. So you've got an interesting pedigree, and you bring a lot to this race, and you're resonating with the great state and the Missourians there. Tell me, from a national security perspective, immigration and the wall, what does it mean to you? Because the left clearly defines the wall as something as racist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first, I'd like to say thank you to Marty Hughes for having us. This morning, we've been invited to a meet and greet here in their theater in Branson, Missouri. But to get to your question regarding the immigration issue and the wall specifically, the first thing that people ask me is whether or not I think the wall will be effective. And of course, the answer is yes. In 2017, for example, we saw immigration reduced by 45% just by having the mere conversation of building a wall. So that's number one, it does work. But right now, we have a war going on in Mexico that nobody is talking about. Last year alone, there were over 23,000 deaths due to armed conflict in northern Mexico and Mexico. In Afghanistan, there were 16,000 deaths. In Iraq, there were 17,000 deaths. So the United States would be safer if it bordered Iraq or Afghanistan. And this is something that nobody's talking about. So it is a huge physical national security issue. It is the biggest threat that we face. Our southern border is the biggest threat that we face, a physical threat to the United States. And we can't be a nation state unless we have proper border security. No, the three things that define a nation state at the very basic level is having a central government, having a border, and having the means to protect that border. Right now, we have a central government. We have the means to protect the border, but we do not have a proper border on the south.
Right. So you've had an illustrious career in the Navy as an intelligence analyst, and you're sitting here talking about facts. And frankly, when you make that comparison that it would be safer to be on the border of Iraq and Afghanistan, that has to absolutely wake your constituents up. What do you think you can do to support the president in making sure that this wall gets built?
Well, so I was selected for Donald Trump's National Security Council in September 2016, just before the election. So, I mean, I started my service to this nation after the attacks of 9/11. I was grateful to be selected for the Naval Intelligence Program, where I went on to serve on the USS Bonhomme Richard. I served with SEAL Team 5 as an intelligence analyst, and ultimately was recruited and detailed to the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I served in a diplomatic capacity in Latin America. Matthew Friedman, he was the gentleman that selected me for Donald Trump's National Security Council. He selected me based on my experience. He selected me based on my work with Talasorian, and we ended up getting knocked off right after the election. First three people that had the clearance and the ability to negotiate or start even going through the classified information after the CIA delivered the safe to Trump Tower just after the election was Matthew Friedman, General Mike Flynn, and Donald Trump. Those are the only three in the room. And we saw what happened to General Mike Flynn. This is why I'm running. We have operating illegally in the United States a deep state that is shifting our elections into the hands of an autocratic system, a liberal cabal. And that's exactly what they're doing right here in the state of Missouri.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. We are seeing that, and we report on that regularly on Your Voice America. Let's shift this discussion over to China. You know, recently we've seen the trade wars between the Trump administration and the Chinese government, particularly around, issues that are affecting your great state, your farmers, with the soybean crops. His meeting with the president of the EU last week, President Juncker, has actually shown some promising signs to increase their consumption of your great products out of the state of Missouri. But tell me, is that going to be enough? And, how do you support what the president's doing in terms of bringing China to its knees to get them to play trade fairly?
Right. I think a lot of elected officials are just fearful of talking about China because, frankly, they don't know how to form an opinion on it. China is a huge threat to us. Right now, they're building artificial islands off the coast of the Philippines, inside Philippine territorial waters. They're trapping territory in Africa. What nobody's talking about is most recently they secured 1,500 acres on the north side of Jamaica, looking at Cuba, looking at the United States. So this is a big economic threat, but it's also a national security threat. As it relates to China's relationship to our state here in Missouri, they buy up a third of our soybean crops, and they most recently threatened to place a tariff on our soybeans should Trump place tariffs on their steel and aluminum. To that, and a lot of people get nervous about that. But we have to have a senator that has the ability to go in there and negotiate. Right now, you cannot convince me the most talented negotiators we have in the United States are serving us in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, for example, was building, on the other hand, was building 92-story buildings when he was my age. The man turned $1 million into several billion in an atmosphere, one of the most hostile atmospheres in the world, Manhattan, in terms of economic development. That's a tough neighborhood, and he was able to do it. So he knows what he's doing. He's obviously using these tariffs as a negotiating tool. What we need is somebody here in the state of Missouri that says, we can identify, assets that China has here in our state, and we can leverage that. We can find a chink in their armor, drive a wedge, and we can tell China, you can go mess with Michigan, you can go mess with California, but you stay the hell away from my Missouri farmers. That's what we need here.
Right. Okay. That's a strong position. I like it. Let's talk about the VA. Speaking of hostile atmospheres, the VA has been plagued with issues for many, many years. Our nation's veterans have been ignored, sidelined, and unfortunately left to die before they've been able to get treatment. As a veteran, do you support yesterday's nomination or confirmation of Robert Wilkie as VA Secretary? And what would you do to support the Secretary and President Trump's agenda to revamp and streamline the VA?
I do support his nomination. I think that he's, time will tell. I'm sure he'll do a good job. He was selected for very good reason. But as a senator, it's my job to make sure that he has the tools that he needs. Right now, our Congress is passing bills that is crippling our VA, simply because our elected officials aren't reading the bills that are being written. The bill most recently regarding the Veteran Choice Act, for example, which affects a lot of Missouri veterans because these are rural veterans. They live in rural areas where they don't have access to the VA. They live outside of that 40-mile radius, so they're seeking health care, on the private side. And this year, the Congress passed a bill that protected the VA and her veterans and doctors. I can get into the weeds, and I'd love to do that. I don't know if we have the time, but I'm happy to go ahead and produce a statement on it. What they did was they passed a bill that was essentially written by the VA for the VA and helped out the VA bureaucracy. Didn't help out the doctors, didn't help out the nurses, didn't help out the veterans.
Close this up with a statement from you, frankly, Cortland, that's going to help the constituents, your voters in the state of Missouri, to better understand why they should elect Cortland Sykes for Missouri. You're primarying. You're going up against Josh Hawley, who has been endorsed by the president, and you're going to not primary, but you're going to run head to head against Claire McCaskill should you secure the nomination for the Senate run. Why should folks vote for you?
Well, you mentioned the VA just a minute ago, and I'll just share this brief story with you. I'm the only candidate in this race that has sat down, written a bill, and seen it pass through the committee, and it's actually on the floor for a vote, on the House floor for a vote. I'm not even convinced that Claire McCaskill has ever sat down and written a bill herself. I have, and it illustrates a point. It illustrates that I offer the kind of leadership, the particular brand of leadership that I don't have to sit around and wait to be told what to do. I don't have to have Mitch McConnell giving me any orders. I know what's right and what's wrong. A couple of years ago, a gentleman came into my office and he had a stack of papers. There was evidence proving that they used Agent Orange in Thailand. All of these Vietnam veterans were exposed to Agent Orange, but it wasn't listed on the VA list. The VA has a list of places where if you were exposed to Agent Orange, they will treat your symptoms, and Thailand wasn't on there. We had to write a bill that would pass at the House, the Senate, and then ultimately have the president sign it. Right now, it's sitting at the House, and there's a very good chance that it's going to be passed. But Josh Hawley has to be sit around and told what to do. He has to be given marching orders. Claire McCaskill, she's a puppet. She has to be given orders. I don't need that. I will lead. I will lead by example. I will take action just like I have my entire life.
Fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you on today, Cortland. How can folks support you and follow you out there on social media?
You can look us up at CortlandSykes.com. Reach out to us. We want to, if you have any questions, we want them. We're in the last week of this primary election, and this is important to us. I mean every word that's on my website. I mean it. I didn't copy and paste it from the Heritage Foundation. I'm a fan of the Heritage Foundation. They do good work, but this wasn't designed by some, fancy consultants. I sat down, I wrote my positions, I believe in my message. This country is at an inflection point. We can lose this country if we elect these puppet politicians.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for stopping by. We look forward to following your race, and good luck in the primary coming up.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for having us.